This episode of Yes But Why podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/Yes But Why. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Download your free audiobook today at audibletrial.com/Yes But Why. I'm Amy Jordan, and this is Yes But Why podcast. Yeah. What were you going to Berlin for?
I was there for the European film market. There's a production company called Mitch Smith Media that I've been working with, and I'm attached to direct 2 of their films on their slate. And we've been working on pitching them with distributors and financiers and all sorts of super exciting stuff, obviously. So they've brought me to markets with them a couple times over the last couple months just to help pitch the project. It's been very interesting because it's not a side of things that I've ever had to, like, it's kind of the opposite of creativity, right? It's sales and acquisitions and all this stuff I've never really had to learn being on the creative side of things, but I'm glad I'm learning them because it's important and confusing as hell. I should have asked before, am I allowed to swear? Is swearing okay, or should I refrain?
Swear, please swear.
Oh, fuck. Great. All right.
It's totally fine.
That's fucking wonderful.
I clicked
I just realized I had
on
before.
every single one of the podcast posts, even if nobody swears, because it's like,
Great.
We probably talked about dicks or something. It's fine.
Right. I mean, we got into dicks pretty quickly on this one, so that's probably a good. Well, we're both from Massachusetts, so like, we're gonna. Someone actually once. Have you heard this? Somebody once told me that they could tell I was from Boston by the way I used the word fuck as an adjective. Has anybody told you that?
No. Do you use the word fuck as an adjective in a different way?
No,
like fucking
no, just
great?
like, that something is, just like fucking great, fucking cool, fucking sucks. I guess maybe it's the frequency more than the use, or maybe it's something about my cadence or attitude, or maybe they're just projecting. I don't know.
Yeah. They watched too many Ben Affleck movies, and I think they know.
Oh gosh. Oh my gosh.
Back in the day, it used to be the Kennedys, but now it's Ben Affleck and Matt Damon.
That's what an evolution.
I don't care about this anyway. It's fine.
So fine.
So I am fascinated by your, like, everything you mentioned with reference to the European, what was it, film market?
Oh, yes.
Like, so my question is this. I'm a novice when it comes to the business part, right? I do theater, I do improv, I work in live theater mostly. So
which is awesome. I saw that on your website.
What's up?
That's awesome. I saw that on your website, and we should totally talk about improv at some point because we should. But sorry, you were saying about about the business side of things in regards to film.
So you're talking about pitching stuff, and you're talking about being with a team. How did you get your team? And like, was it through a festival? Clearly you're a mover and a shaker. You've made a ton of movies, not just you've acted in them, you've directed them, you've written them. I did IMDb stalk you a little bit. You've done everything. Like, in the list of jobs, there's at least one next to every job, right? So you got involved pretty early.
Not Griffin Electric.
How'd you get the business?
Mitch actually, who started the company, he found me it's funny. It's one of these things where I guess everything is sort of a butterfly effect that leads to infinite outcomes. But Mitch saw a feature that I did called Terrifier, which is on Netflix. So it's a very twisted horror movie. And he saw that film and he reached out to my manager about, well, actually, no, he saw that film and then he did research on me. And originally, I think he was going to reach out to me about acting in one of their projects, and then found out that I work behind the camera as well. And he's a big champion of getting women in directorial positions of leadership. And so then he reached out to me about doing that. And so he commissioned me to write one of his stories as a script, and we started talking, and I met Joey, who's on his team as well, and Vinka, their lawyer, and kind of just, collecting people and starting to assemble a team and establishing kind of a rapport over the course of weeks. And then there's another script that I co-wrote with one of my writing partners, Todd Jacobs, and and I said, hey, can we add this to the slate as well? And it was kind of, from there, it was just, then we went to the American film market in Los Angeles together, and then the European film market. And then what was cool is that I kind of had, by the time we were in Berlin, established a relationship with this production company, even though I'm not necessarily a part of it. I contract and freelance, but I am also a part of it, and which is, I'm sure, as you know, that part is kind of common, moving in and out of different teams and different sort of families. But then this time I got to meet two of their other directors, who are also women, Mariana Dean and Tash Ann, and they both they were in the same position as I was, where they were attached to direct their other projects, and we were all staying in this one apartment, and it's nice. I mean, you get to. I was nervous, of course, because I have a lot of social anxiety and I'm an introvert in general, but then also because, you get together with other creative types, and there are a lot of strong personalities generally. And I know that I'm sure the theater world is similar. And sometimes they don't always mesh well, but with this group, we meshed really well and got really good at pitching together, and kind of where some people would handle the business side and some people would handle the creative side, and you kind of catch a flow, for lack of a better word, and you all care a lot about what you're talking about, and it becomes easier to convince other people to care about it.
Fascinating.
I don't know if that answered the question.
No, you totally did. I just get lost in thought, and then I remember that I'm being recorded because I'm staring at the screen. But I'm just like, yeah.
I love it.
Cool. You mentioned
I'm glad
Mitch.
that was the reaction.
You mentioned Mitch. What's Mitch's last name?
Oh, Mitch Smith. I'm sorry. Mitch Smith Media is the company, and he is the Mitch Smith of the aforementioned.
Mitch Smith Media. Yes.
Yes.
I just figured we're talking about him.
I don't know why
he's sort of the epicenter of the team, so might as well get his name.
Yeah, for sure. With that particular team, I mean, it's cool because with freelancing, you get to work with all sorts of different teams, and that's one of the ones that I have the privilege of being a part of. I'm glad they found me for sure.
That he's like helping you, and especially other female filmmakers, get in the room when it comes to pitching new projects and stuff like that. Now, when you mention the European film market versus the U.S. film market, is that similar to, now again, I'm a novice, I know nothing here, so you can be like, haha, you're silly, you don't know, and tell me the right stuff.
I only barely know.
It was like pitch time, or no, it was pilot season. And I wonder, is that the same time?
No, they're different. Okay. I mean, well, kind of, because pilot season used to be, January through March, and then and that would be when everybody cast their pilots in the days when networks were gods.
At that point. Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah. That's. I mean, typically that's how I know it. At least. I come from a. Yeah, no, people are pitching their pilots in like the summer and fall, and then they're cast January through March, or originally, and then they were cast January through March, and then April a lot of them shoot, and then May is the upfronts where the networks decided when or which shows were being brought to series. And that used to be the case. Oh, and then they would shoot, they'd start shooting episodic season. And that used to be the case. And that's kind of changed now that streaming platforms have become so prevalent. Mm-hmm. So now there isn't as much of a condensed pilot season, quote unquote, doing air quotes with my hands. But now there's more, it's kind of on a rolling basis because they're not beholden to a typical network schedule anymore, in the same way. But the pitches, the markets aren't, I'm sure that there are people that are pitching television there for sure, but they're in different stages of development typically than the ones that are really a part of pilot season. And a lot of people at the markets are pitching films, as we were, either films that have not been made yet that they're trying to help get made, or films that have been made and they're trying to find distribution for, and things like that.
Interesting. You mentioned earlier that you had some writing partners. How did you meet your writing partners?
Well, one of them is Todd Jacobs, who I mentioned before. We have a script together, a horror script that I'm attached to direct, which is one of the ones I mentioned. He and I don't know how we originally met. It was a couple of years ago. I think it was at some networking thing. I think we tried to worked, and then we ended up working together on a short that I was acting and doing stunts in, and he was producing and had co-written the short film called Dandelion. And I'm not sure, but I knew that he was a writer and a good writer. And we had talked about working together for a long time. And now in the past year, we finally did and cranked out a feature and a pilot, and are now working or going to start working soon on another one. I did just connect with another writer who I'm going to start writing with as well. I can't say his name yet because the paperwork has not officially been signed, but I will get back to you. And then lastly, I do also write alone sometimes. And in those cases, my writing partner is my cat, because she likes to sit on my lap and be paws on with the process, so to speak. She's very invested in everything I do.
Yeah, it's important.
Very supportive.
Yeah.
Very, very important to have a supportive cat. Yeah.
She knows where her food's coming from, so.
Exactly right. And she knows how body positive I am with cats, as we spoke about. So.
Yes, exactly.
Very important.
So did you go to film school?
I did not. Film school of life.
In this whole world?
I started doing film in high school, and I was actually I was in an improv troupe in high school, and I did theater, and I started doing film, and I was supposed to go to college, and I went to a high school where everybody went to college, and so it was very much encouraged for me to do that. And the more I worked in film, the more I kind of felt as though maybe experience would perhaps be more valuable for what I wanted to do than sort of textbook learning, at least for me. And so I did apply, and I went through the whole song and dance, and I got a partial writing scholarship to Pace University in New York. And I decided to defer my acceptance for a year and take a gap year and see how that went. And I ended up working a bunch during the gap year, and it kind of made me realize that I wouldn't be able to dedicate really the proper amount of time to school, to a typical education, that I wouldn't be able to balance doing both. And I also, I consider myself an autodidact. I like to read, and I like to take classes, and I like to learn, but I like to do so outside of kind of that typical system. It's just, it works better for me. So I didn't end up going to film school, but I study film all the time as much as I can in different ways.
So you knew early on that you just wanted to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. Or I thought I did, and then I started doing it, and it was rewarding, and so I just kind of kept doing it. And now I'm on gap year, a couple gap years in at this point. I don't know that Pace would still have me, so I think I'm committed.
Yeah, I feel like Pace, if you called Pace today and we're like, hey, could I go to school? They'd be like, who are you? What's happening?
Yeah.
Like, we changed the computers 2 years ago. We don't know who you are.
Yeah, everything's been deleted. You'll have to take the SAT again.
Oh,
in which case I would
imagine.
Yeah, no, I would like to not ever imagine that. I would do something else. No, at this point, my backup is would be working in forensics, because there are certain jobs where you don't actually need a bachelor's in order to do them. So that, or I would just sell my body.
Investigation forensics.
Yeah, like to be a medical examiner, like the person who shows up on the crime scene and says this was either murder or suicide, or the kind of overarching cause of death. That person in Georgia does not need a bachelor's. Last time I checked, that may have changed.
Huh. The weird thing about that, I met this woman years ago at a temp job who had a degree in that, and she was having a hard time finding a job. Like, she was like,
maybe she was overqualified.
Probably. Huh. Probably. She got a degree in it, and they were like, listen, books, that's enough.
Listen, Four Eyes. Yeah.
I mean, because right after I talked to her, there was a news story about how Austin had thousands of cases that they couldn't solve because there wasn't anybody testing DNA. There was nobody working in the lab. What? And I was like, can I go part-time? What can I do to help that? That seems like a problem. I was like, can I just take a quick course? Green is this guy and blue is that guy. And I just, dip this into whatever. I'm clearly that I'm not, but you know what I mean?
I believe,
how can I help?
Yeah, whatever is the scientific term. That's alarming.
Yeah.
That's very alarming.
Yeah.
I hope that they've solved that problem, but I just have no idea.
No.
Great. I'll be there tomorrow.
Of all the wonderful things in Austin, the APD is not one of those things.
No.
But
I luckily did not have any sort of interactions with the Austin Police Department while I was there. Fortunate enough
the
to
individual
avoid
humans are nice, but there's a whole corrupt system.
It's the system. Well, right.
I mean,
our police
theory that I
in
have,
general
which
corrupt.
is there used to be mobs, and I say used to be with air quotes here. There used to be mobs. We've watched a bunch of movies about real life mobs and how they happened, and now all of a sudden everyone's like, I guess they're not here anymore. I'm like, no, they're here. They're just doing different stuff. They found a new way to hide. They're clearly not working in trash anymore. Or, whatever construction. They're like, no, we're not going to take those jobs. We'll do other things like politics and police departments. So there's a lot of that.
Oh, I'm completely ignorant to this. That sounds really fascinating.
Well,
and
a lot of it's conjecture. So don't worry.
Alarming
there are no
again.
facts in what I'm saying at all.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, I think... Thank you for the post disclaimer. I got really invested.
No, it's a theory I have about how the idea that if there really is an organization, right? If there's a multi-generational organization, I don't care how many people go to jail, there's still people who are involved in that organization. And, maybe they learned lessons from the movies that we watch, but largely not. So Boston, right? The Irish mob. It was a big deal when my mom was a little kid. And the guy, Whitey Bulger, was just found. One of the most famous Boston mobsters who disappeared and nobody knew where he was just found. That it happened recently, not in the 60s or whatever. He was an actual mobster on the lam. I was just like, what? This is real life. This is not like Goodfellas. This is an actual real life thing. I mean,
wow.
I just figure like, those people still exist. Like they're there. They're just doing other stuff.
Yeah. Well, some of them
I can't imagine it's great.
Right. I mean, no, I mean, you're right. Some of them now work in high positions of government, both in here and in some other countries.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, no, you're absolutely right.
The older you get, the more like respect people give you, just like in general. And sometimes I'm like, yeah, no, that's not always the case.
It shouldn't always be the case.
Yeah. I'm like, just because that guy's 70 doesn't mean he really knows what's up.
Oh, God, no.
Yeah. But that's a weird tangent. Let's get back to you. I was like, I have gone down a really weird mob-related tangent. Super crazy.
I was in it. I was, listen, the other night I was up, I was super jet lagged, and I was awake at 3 a.m. reading some very dark conspiracy theories. So I'm here for rabbit holes. I get it. This is a safe space, is what I'm trying to say.
Also, my grandfather was a cop in Boston during the mob times, so that's why I'm also slightly like obsessed with the idea.
That's really, you should write about it. I don't know if you write, but
I do.
That sounds pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I wish I knew more about him. Him being dead and everyone that was his contemporary also dead make it difficult, but and the internet not being around when he was there. But I have like a small box of stuff. But he was a cop. It's like clearly this guy was a closed book. So mostly I just take stories that my mom and my uncle tell me, and it'll probably have to be a fictional story. I won't be able to say this really happened because I don't have any real proof.
You could just put inspired by a true story. That allows so much creative license. World's your oyster at that point.
That should be the name of a movie in general. Just inspired by a true story. That's the movie. And it's like just a bunch of copycat murders. I'm trying to think of what that movie would be. Inspired. I mean, you could put inspired by a true story through a lot. There are a lot of movies that could have that title, depending on how loosely you use it. Yeah. Like that would be a fun writing prompt. I'm going to do that for the next class. Yeah, I teach improv and sketch comedy writing, and also I help people with other writing too. But yeah, I mostly teach that kind of stuff, just to get ideas out there. But yeah, the serious stuff, because I do a lot of comedy, so my like off time, I'm often writing, brainstorming like more serious stuff. How'd you get involved in horror?
Depends on how far back you're asking about. I mean, when I was a kid, whenever I was sick, that would be what I would watch. When I was staying at home sick, I would watch horror movies. And there's this weird, almost meditative quality to horror where if you're really invested in what's happening, your cortisol levels are up, your adrenaline is going, and it's almost a high. There's almost especially I deal with depression, and it's just one way where I feel like I'm in somebody else's world and I can't worry about my own problems because this chick is trapped in a basement, and if she doesn't get out, some dude with a chainsaw is gonna, whatever. So, you're immersed in somebody else's world and somebody else's more immediate danger, and it kind of pulls you in a way that other genres don't. And I love other genres as well. There's just so much freedom in horror, and I feel like it's one of the few genres where you can be really heavy-handed about a message or some sort of social commentary, and get away with it.
Yeah, you really can.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, that's interesting. It's funny because horror movies get a bad rap.
They do, and people don't see them as art. They don't get awards, and yet it really, you have to understand human sociology and psychology on some level in order to understand what scares people. Because, you know, there are a lot of mainstream horror movies where they rely on jump scares, and those are fun, but that's not really scaring somebody. Like, you know, a movie like Get Out was so popular partially because there really weren't any jump scares, but there's just like a level of tension and a level of anxiety, and like The Shining does that for 3 hours. I mean, you know, that you have to kind of understand people on some level in order to really scare them, and to make them continue thinking about what you've shown them after they've turned off the movie and their lights are out. And you're right, people don't give it enough credit. And some of that, I think, is because
talking smack about people who are working in the horror film industry, and I'm like, what? We're making movies like you.
Oh yeah, I
so much more production value required too.
Oh my gosh, I know. And then the level of skill and if it's done well, the level of skill regarding, you know, lighting, camera work, editing, sound design is hugely important in horror. I mean, there's so many tiny pieces that people don't even think about. And there was another horror movie that I did, and I was at a party recently with people that I knew, and two of them started making fun of this horror movie that I had done, which I will not name because I don't think it deserved that. But I'm also biased. But so they started making fun of it and saying that it was, you know, not very good. And I didn't argue with them on that front, but I did point out that, you know, I have health insurance as a result. So like, and I made some joke about how that particular film had completely paid for the IUD that was inside me, and then everyone kind of left me alone. So I'm great at parties. But you know, like horror is, even if it's not great, if it takes you out of whatever you're dealing with for a couple hours, that's kind of the point. And if it makes you think, then that's kind of the point. And that's what movies are supposed to do.
Yeah.
You know, we're supposed to reflect what we're dealing with and provide possible answers or facilitate dialogue or just provide some sort of relief or entertainment.
Yeah. It's probably the only genre of movies where I actually legitimately become invested, because I'm really, I'm like super obsessed with, you know, because I'm doing this podcast. So like I'm super into all the people that are working on the movie. So while I'm watching the movie, I'm like looking at the actors. I'm like IMDbing them. Like, oh, what do I know him from? Oh, where's she from? Oh, what's this?
Right.
These people knew each other before. Like, so the whole time I'm watching the movie, I'm like researching everyone that's been in it. And if I see any names in the intro credits that I recognize, like, you know, music or casting directors or something like that, I'll be Googling them too. Like, oh, they're involved with this. What's going on? And it's just the way I am, because I'm like, that's what I'm interested in. My husband likes to say that, you know, I don't remember what he told me. I don't remember like anything that's happened in our relationship for the 10 years that we've been together, but I could tell you like which episode of Friends, like this one random lady was in, like, oh, beautiful. Well, yeah, she's like selling toothpaste right now. And she's also in this small sitcom, but like, you know, she was in like the 4th season of Friends. Like, I don't know why. It's like,
you are the best kind of moviegoer.
I'm interested in people at all levels. And so like, for instance, if I see a girl or somebody in 2 commercials, right? I'm like, yeah, good job, girlfriend. You got those 2 commercials. Aww. What's up? Like,
you're like supportive. That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah, it's us, right? This, you know, it's my people. And it's like in the same way that like one hopes, well, I mean, I guess too, I do it with such fervor because there's the other side. So I feel like earlier we were starting to talk about before the initial glitch. We were talking about the idea of like
before
the industry and like what I meant technical glitch. Not me going down my weird mob-related tangent.
I just enjoyed the gravitas. I just liked how, because if someone's listening, they don't know what it was. So I wanted to make it sound much more frightening than it actually was. I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, it's fine. It's fine. We were talking about the way people are to each other in the industry, right?
Yes.
And so the reason why I try to be super ultra positive is because in the world that I'm in, which is the comedy world, improv and sketch and stand-up, people are very, bitchy about each other. Like, if somebody does well, people are like, oh, that guy, he thinks he can go to LA and, and you're like, relax. Like, how does him doing anything affect you?
Pump the brakes. Like, yeah, just because someone else wants to sit at the table doesn't mean there's no longer room for you at the table. Just build a bigger table. I was just talking about this with one of my roommates like a couple hours ago, about how there are certain people that think that if you get some, that means I have less, which is, I understand where the mindset comes from, but it's also just a shitty thing to be, and to treat other people that way, and to not. And sometimes it is so easy to just get jealous of people because they have something you want, or it seems like success comes easier to them. And sometimes it does. And sometimes all your paranoias are true. Oh God. But at the same time, it's so important to remind ourselves to encourage each other and to lift other people up, because it sounds so cliche, but a rising tide lifts all ships.
Yeah, and it's not like there's somebody with a list that's like 3 people from Austin, Texas have become famous this last year. That's it for the quota. Like, get out of here. You know what I mean? Like when people are like, oh, so-and-so moved away to LA and now he can do blank. And you're like, you could also move to LA. And maybe if you did this work that he's doing, going to clubs and getting himself out there, you'd get the gig. Like, who knows? You don't know. You can't just sit on your couch and complain that it's happening for other people. So instead, since I have chosen the couch life, I am going to be excited about all the people.
I love it. That's so beautiful. I feel like that's rarer than it should be.
I think so too. And I think it's slightly born of my improv training. Talk to me about your improv. So when you were younger, you said you did improv and acting in high school, and then you immediately got into film. Yeah. Tell me about the beginnings. So, like, what was your first movie? What was your first improv experience? Like, what got you going into the whole thing?
Improv. I don't remember how it originally started. I mean, I think it probably originally came from just like riffing with people and like riffing with friends, or riffing with my dad loves to do improv riffs, and but I mean in high school I was in a professional improv troupe, so it was like 7 adults and then me. I don't remember how that happened, but we would do parties and like events, and we had a show every month, and I really loved it. And then when I was living in LA for about 4 years, my gap years, so to speak, I ended up training, and you'll actually know these guys, but I ended up training, like I did a round at Groundlings and a round at Second City and a round at iOS and 2 rounds at UCB. And then I did some improv at Dad's Garage when I was in Atlanta. And it's interesting because, this is a mini tangent, but in LA, pretty much everybody in every improv class I went to was an actor or in some capacity in the industry, at least, or, like stand up or wanted to do improv professionally. And in Atlanta, I was the only person in the film industry in the improv class, because everyone else was using it for like presentations at work, or for, synergy exercises, or, they all had normal corporate jobs. It was really fascinating that they still were taking improv and that it was serving their non-circus lives. I thought that was cool.
Non-circus lives. I like that. That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like, isn't everyone who lives in Los Angeles involved in the movie industry in some
Yeah,
way?
pretty
like,
much.
I think that if you
Pretty
are
much.
a barista or like if you, work at one of the
Yeah.
stores, they make you live outside the city limits, right? Isn't that correct?
Well, all the baristas are actors there.
You're right.
So you cannot escape. It is everywhere.
Wow, that's so super intense.
But yeah, improv, I mean, I don't do it as much as I used to, but I use it now I feel like I sometimes use it when I write and when I direct, because you have to think on your feet, but then I also definitely still use it when I act, in auditions and things like that, to kind of, you want to show that you can play and that you understand the world well enough to understand it outside of purely what's on the page, I think. And so there have definitely been times where I've booked acting jobs, at least partially from improving at the end of the scene until I'm told to stop, basically.
Yeah. I bet you it helps
your I love improv.
imagination
People who do it
too.
are awesome. Oh yeah, absolutely. It's great, and it's great. I mean, and you. Oh, thanks. Yeah, well, I don't know. I'm having hip problems now, so I'm not sure what age even is. But
oh, that's
like you were saying earlier,
high school when you did the improv troupe initially.
Oh, I was like, I don't know how young I am now, but
I have no idea how old you are at all. So
that's I was gonna say. I was like, how does she know? Yeah, no, for sure. It definitely, and it was definitely.
Stalking of you.
Let me know if you're able to find it, so I can see if I need to do some recon on the internet.
Well, the internet said your hometown was in Massachusetts, so I think you need to fix that.
Yeah. Well, now we've talked about it, and so there's no hiding it. It's public knowledge now. It's over. Everybody knows.
But what I meant about the age thing was that, like, when you're under 25, your brain is still like developing, and it's still like, coding through like the way that you as an adult will be able to do it. So being able to, and by do it I mean live life. But they when you're in the
thank you for the clarification.
You never know who's listening. I can't accept a soundbite that might say anything crazy.
She's talking about the prefrontal cortex, everybody. Calm down. Pump the brakes.
The brain. Since you developed the, improv part of your brain when you were younger, I think, like, because I really think it ignited, personally for me anyway, it ignited a part of my imagination that now is forever going. Like, it never stops.
Oh, I love that. That's
just
beautiful.
Have endless amounts of ideas. I have books and books, notebooks filled with ideas. Like 90% of the stuff I write down will never come to fruition, but there's just so many ideas. It's made parenting difficult as well, because my imagination now imagines terrible, terrible things happening to myself and my child all the time.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it's really not a skill you want.
I know. That's really funny that you say that, because sometimes I'll be I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, but there are times when I'm driving and I'll sometimes just be like, I could just swerve into like the other lane. I could just like do a donut right here and end it all. Like, and these are not things I want to do, but once in a while my brain will be like, what if like I'm in my house and I hear a noise and like, there's probably a murderer in here. Like, my brain will instantly find the way that someone like, crawled through the vents and has been living off of my crumbs for weeks, only coming out when I leave the house. Like, I can only imagine how much worse that must get when you have a kid.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like I didn't realize, it's like for my entire life, I didn't care about myself at all. And now, now I have this other thing that I take care of, and he's like super important, and it's my like number one job to keep him alive and also make sure he's not an asshole.
No pressure.
And it's a lot.
Oh.
It's a lot.
No pressure. Yeah. You're only forming a human life. Like, oh man. Yeah. That sounds very stressful.
Yeah, but
I've heard
like
that's
you
a
on the road
thing
talking about like, you know, if I just turn, I think about that like when I'm going down the highway at like 80 miles per hour, you know, like, cause there's some spots in Texas where that's the speed limit, right? And I'm going because, you know, everybody around me wants me to, even though I don't love traveling that fast, but I'll go and I'll think like, you know, even just the slightest bit of wind could push me, and I'm going so fast. It could, I mean, I have imagined every number of things. Terrible.
Oh yeah,
things.
like something could fall off the truck in front of you. You could sneeze at the wrong time. I sometimes worry. Sneezing is terrifying because you close your eyes. You cannot physically sneeze with your eyes open. It is impossible.
Yeah,
I dare everyone to try it.
Body becomes involuntary for a second. Yeah, it's fucked up.
Which is like it just rebels against you. Here's something that I worry about all the time. Not all the time. That makes me sound. I don't know. You know what? That doesn't matter. Sometimes I'll worry about that, like one of those big natural disasters will happen, and I'll be in the wrong place. Like I'll be somewhere like. There'll be some tsunami that will somehow be big enough to get from the Atlantic Ocean to Atlanta, which would be nearly impossible. But, you know, like some earthquake or some, the monster from Cloverfield has suddenly surfaced, like something huge.
Totally. Florida sinks and then it's you guys. So, you know, yeah, I get it.
Florida sinks. We're next. Everything's crumbling. Like global warming, we finally made it, our planet inhabitable to ourselves. Like, and something happens. And I'm stuck on like the highway with wherever all the cars are gridlocked, or, you know, like I can't get to my cat or my family or, you know, food. There's chaos everywhere. No one has power. I sometimes worry about that stuff, and I can't imagine it's healthy or helpful. But,
you know,
sometimes there's nothing you can do.
Think about the people who are on the writing staff for the Walking Dead television show. They have to brainstorm that shit every day. They're like, okay, what new terrible thing could happen? So we've had a cajillion seasons,
maybe that's why
everything terrible has happened. What else? Like those people like are crying themselves to sleep at night. That being said, maybe not. I mean, you are involved in horror. Does the horror films that you make, because you're making them, doesn't it kind of like take the sting out? You know, like because you know, when you watch horror films now, are you like watching for details? You're like, oh yeah, I know what kind of blood they used. Or like, oh man, I bet you they used this rig to get that going. Like, are you able to watch it, or are you still sucked in every time?
It depends on how good the film is, and it also depends on how I'm feeling. Like I've kind of gotten to a point where I can turn it on and off sometimes. Like so for types of horror where it's I don't know, certain subgenres of horror, whether they be more psychological or kind of slow burn or thrillers or nightmare horror, certain subgenres, I just want to be in it, and I just want to be, you know, and if something is really, if a shot is really interesting or music is really interesting, I'll kind of take note of it, but I'll try to just be in it. If it comes to a part in the film where it's kind of gore porn or torture porn or something that I don't necessarily enjoy watching as much, then I'll be looking at it from a production perspective. So like when we were at Sundance, there was a film that I saw with a friend of mine, and she is not a horror person. And I won't name the film because it was very disappointing, but there's a part where someone's getting stabbed, and I could tell that my friend was really uncomfortable, and I leaned over and I said, you know that the Foley artists achieved that sound by stabbing a watermelon or a cantaloupe. And bone-breaking noises are like the sounds of celery and carrots breaking. And I could tell that it kind of made her feel better. And so it's nice to be able to turn it on and off. I definitely don't think because I've heard some people say, oh, well, it becomes work and then it's kind of ruined for you. And I feel like I have the opposite, where sometimes if I really love how something is done, then I want to know, I'm trying to figure out how each aspect of it was done or achieved. And not only that, but I think I appreciate it more in some ways of, you know, this lighting setup. You could tell that this took a long time to set up. Like you could tell that their AD had a headache about this, or, you know, I like what they did in in color correction, or I like the choreography, or in some ways it makes you appreciate all the tiny details that, a small army of people put their blood, sweat, and tears into making happen.
Right. It's like at the end of the movies now, they have a thing that says like this many people were employed with this film, and you're like, whoa.
Right.
Every time I'm like, whoa, that's so many people.
Oh yeah, it's great for any economy of where a production lands. I mean, it creates so many jobs. It pumps in a ton of local revenue that stays in whatever economy you're in.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's
the
great.
Texas economy doesn't understand that. They think that if we have movies, it means that Brad Pitt's moving here, and they don't want that. And I was like, no, that's not what it means. It means the rest of us get to work.
That's not what it means. And also, why wouldn't you want that?
Well,
He's producing some really interesting stuff nowadays. Such a nuisance.
He's got 47 kids. I mean, where's he going to live, is all I'm saying.
Not Austin, apparently.
No, wherever else they live. Oh my God. So, you mentioned that, you're watching the movies and you're able to see all these different things. And some people say that takes away from it. But I really just feel like because now you know it and you love it, it helps you establish different ways to, see what's good. Like when you were watching when you were a novice, you didn't know what everything was, and you're watching good versus bad for you is about how it makes you feel. But now good versus bad for you involves what you know about production as well. And so a movie could be, good to the layman, but you're watching it and you're like, yeah, but they took all these shortcuts and they didn't use good music and all this other stuff that they had at their fingertips they didn't take advantage of. And now you get to know, who's really doing it, and even if a movie doesn't do well, you're like, you guys can hate it if you want. That was a perfectly done movie.
Oh yeah. And that definitely happens. And I still have a ton to learn. And in some ways, sometimes I almost find myself learning more from bad movies, because if a film is really, really good, then you're kind of in it, you're along for the ride, and like you were saying, you're invested, whatever genre it might be. And with a bad movie, in a lot of ways, the only way to get through it is to kind of break down, okay, like this is why that sort of movement didn't work. This is why that edit was weird. This is why this music doesn't fit what's happening on screen, or, that in a way, it's almost easier to identify what not to do when you see it done poorly.
Yeah, I'm always trying to decide, when I watch stuff, because like I said, I'm entrenched in the comedy world. So I'm always trying to figure out the difference between what I enjoy, what I like is my taste, and what is actually good product. It's like, well, I don't like that.
But good is subjective. That's so hard.
Yeah, well, it can be, but also I try to be subjective because I'm a teacher and I'm teaching people that are doing comedy. And sometimes people write comedy that I don't think is very funny. So I then focus on, and if I don't think it's funny, I usually make them tell me why they think it's funny. Cause I'm like, okay, I don't know that I get it. Can you tell me? It's one of the hardest things. I had a student one time that was like, I can't, one of the first questions in the first class was like, I don't get it. What's the joke? I said. And they were like,
oh no.
You tore me apart. That broke my heart. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. I meant it in the most just basic idea. Not, I don't deeply get what you mean. Just what did you mean? Because what ends up on the page and what's in your head are different.
Yeah, that sounds constructive. I imagine in a way that comedy would be, comedy kind of gets treated the same way that horror does, doesn't it? Where it's kind of shafted to the the wings and not really given respect, despite the fact it doesn't win awards. It's not seen as for some reason people don't think it takes talent, when I think it's like horror in that in order to identify what at least a group of people think is funny. I mean, that's hard because people are so different, and what people think is funny is so different. And I imagine it takes a lot of skill, I think, to be able to make people laugh.
Yeah, it can be tough. But I think similarly to horror, comedy is formulaic. And when people can see the formula, they don't love it.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
Stuff that's more complicated is more successful. So like Arrested Development. Like I teach myself, so I don't know much about... I don't know much about like format. Like I've read a few books, but I didn't go to film school and I don't know too much. So in order to teach myself how to write stuff, I just watched television shows and watched movies, and I would take notes. So I would just watch a movie. I'd watch a movie that I've seen 100 times so that I could be like, okay, opening scene, what happens here? And I'd write notes, and then I'd put it together in a framework. And then when I wanted to go write a movie, I would look at my framework that I'd written based on this movie that I like and go, okay, I'll try to do it that way. And same with comedies, like sitcoms. Simple, easy, opening scene, something happens, something wrong happens, they have to solve it, whatever it is. 30 minutes for them to accomplish the whole thing means it has to go pretty fast. So you got to watch, okay, this is what's happening. Commercial break, that kind of stuff. But with Arrested Development...
well, comedy is almost...
Good.
Sorry, go ahead.
No. I can see you talking, but I can't hear you. So I'm like, stop cutting her off.
Oh, no, I was cutting you off. I got excited. I need to work on that. I was just going to say that a lot of comedy, especially sitcoms, involve math almost. It's beat joke. It's the rule of threes on the micro sense, on the macro sense. But you were about to talk about how Arrested Development kind of shatters that, right? I mean, it's almost a different type, which I love Arrested Development.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's less of a formula, it seems. It's like character based.
Yeah. Yeah. And even
like
the two different... Do you ever watch that season that they did in a different style than the other one? And then the reboot?
Oh, yeah. The reboot is not something we talk about. I don't think the reboot was necessarily served the original show. But maybe that's just me being an elitist. I didn't enjoy the reboot. And partially, I think because I loved the original so much.
Right. No, I meant that there's one season, like the first Netflix season, they did it in a totally different order. Like each episode was focused on an individual character throughout the entire plot. And then the next episode would start again at the beginning with a different character and go all the way through. And then they re-released that season, edited the same way the first few seasons were, going in a narrative chronological order versus following the characters. And I was like, I soaked that up because it was the first time I was able to see the way they put the ideas together, because they showed me the same stuff happened, but first it was arranged in this way, and then the second time it was arranged in a different way. And so I was like, tearing through notebooks, taking notes about that. But it's confusing either way, and I think the complication is what helps get me out of it. Like, I'm not deeply obsessed with taking notes while I'm watching Arrested Development, unless they give me homework, like doing one season 2 different ways. I mean, that's just a masterclass right there. But
of course,
I just think for me, it has to be really complicated or wild in a way that distracts me, for me to not just be following along the beats. Like, I'll be counting them out. I'll be like 1, 2, and we're third. Okay. Like, I can't even help it.
Right. That's great, though. I mean,
or like I'll yell for a callback.
Yeah.
So I want to come back to you and what you have been doing. You are making films and pitching films and writing films, but you're also acting in films and also doing stunts. First question, how do you do everything? And then second question, tell me about the acting world, because I feel like we've talked a lot about what it's like to do the writing stuff and the directing stuff and that, but like, tell me about that part of your career, all of the acting and stunt stuff that you've done.
Sure. Well, I actually come from an acting and stunt background. That's how I started in the industry originally, and then moved over to also write and direct. And now I try to alternate between all of them. And I mean, it's for people who are further along in their journey, and I imagine hopefully when I'm further along as well, it will become harder to balance them. But right now, at least, I'm able to kind of bounce between, and luckily have not yet had to choose. Things have kind of come up where I can alternate between them. Because acting-wise, there's really no, I mean, production's the same way, but there's not necessarily a formula to make it happen. I mean, because there are people who did what I did, where I moved out to, I told you I did the gap year. I went out to LA, and there are people who did the exact same thing that I did and had much more success. People who did the same thing that I did and had less, and people who did completely different things and had more or less success. So like, there's no rhyme or reason to any of this, and there's no guaranteed way to do it in a way that's going to quote unquote work or be sustainable. It just takes so much, takes a lot of determination and a lot of not letting rejection wreck you too much, or letting it wreck you and then getting up and moving on. But I definitely took classes for that as well when I was out there. I mean, I did the improv classes that we talked about, but then also did script analysis and scene analysis, and then did a bunch of indie films, and joined the union, which I'm obviously still in. And stunt-wise, it was kind of by accident, where I had been doing martial arts for a number of years, and someone basically pointed out, that those are stunts. Because I had always thought stunts were, you fall out of a building on fire and then roll 50 yards and then shoot somebody. Like I had only ever thought of stunts as being really intense, crazy stuff. I had never considered that running is a stunt, or just holding a gun is a stunt, or, falling onto the floor from a standing position, like all sorts of things that don't seem as crazy. And so then I started marketing myself as somebody who did my own, and that's been helpful in working on projects where they want to have a fight scene, for example, but also want to show the face of the character, not have to hire two people, be able to have more freedom with their coverage, things like that.
Yeah. Do you find, do you have a similar interest in your acting? Like, are you focused on horror films, or, what is it that are you trying to do something in an acting way? Like, oh, I want to do all this kind of stuff, or are you just taking it as it comes?
There are, both in filmmaking and in acting, there are so many things and in life, there's so many things that I want to do. I've definitely gravitated towards horror because in a lot of ways it feels like horror has gravitated towards me, and also because I love it so much. But I definitely still want, I love on both sides, comedy and specific styles of comedy, kind of dark comedy and dry comedy, and I definitely want to do more action movies. I've done one, I think, or I have more than one, two. So many. But like that genre is super fun. I definitely want to do more of that while I'm still able to. There's so many things I want to, fantasy would be fun. There's nothing, I don't think I've ever, other than like porn. I haven't seen something like a genre and said like, no, I never want to do that. And you know, if life gets really hard, then that might change too. Who knows?
No, I don't think that's a good path.
I don't think so either, but
it just doesn't seem to be the kind of path you can share with other paths, and you seem to be a bit of a Renaissance woman.
Thank you. No, you're right. You're right. That would be in many ways restricting, and I am certainly not seriously considering it in case my parents listen to this.
Hey, not that there's anything wrong with that. Porn, I bet you, makes a lot of money, and hey, if everyone's having a good time, hey, it sounds good to me. Whatever.
If everyone's safe, if everyone's a consenting adult, there is nothing wrong with it. And I've actually heard from friends that have worked on the crew side in porn that they get, even the crew makes a lot more money. But anyway, this is, I didn't mean to take us down this path, but point is, genre-wise, there are definitely things that I think I gravitate towards, and maybe things that I'm more comfortable in or better at, but ultimately I want to try and do much more than I will have time for in this short life.
Perhaps.
Or maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, you can be in hundreds of thousands of things. There's plenty of people that are.
I'll get on it. That's true. You're right. I'm doing my best. I'm working on it.
Yeah, right. It's just your journey. It's all good. No matter what happens, it's the greatest thing ever.
Yeah, that's true. Journey, not the destination. All that.
Sure, exactly. So right now, in your journey, what's your jam right now? Like, what's the thing that you're most excited to be working on? What's the thing that you're like, man, I can't wait to do this? And if it's the project with the unnamed writer, you don't have to talk about it, but you know what I mean? Like, just generally, like, what is it that that you have coming up that's kind of like exciting for you?
Well, there are a lot of things that have the potential to be exciting. The things that are definite and for sure that I'm excited about are, so I guess nothing really is. There's a feature called Summer Gold that I'm going to be acting in that I'm really excited about. And that one we film sometime in the next couple of months. I think they're working out. I don't know exactly when we're filming because some things are up in the air, but I know that whenever we film, I'm a part of it and I'm excited about it. And that film's going to be a lot of fun. Carolyn Zelder is the director. I'm really excited to work with her. And there's some very, very basic driving stuff in the film. And I used that as an excuse to do a stunt driving course recently. And I'm really excited to be able to use even a fraction of that. I'm really looking forward to that. That'll be a lot of fun. And then I think I mentioned there's a possibility, has not been made official. There's a possibility, so I won't say the name, but there's a possibility I'm going to be doing a horror convention up in the New England area in April when this airs. Question mark, I think. And so I'm excited about that. And then also Max and the Monster, the short film that I wrote and directed that you saw at Austin where we met. That one we're still waiting to hear back from a couple of festivals overseas. And so hopefully that will lead to something as well. And then I'm excited about the stuff I'm writing. I'm excited about, Max and the Monster is a proof of concept for a series that I'm talking to a company about pitching. I'm excited about the possibilities in that. And it's also, given the subject matter of talking about dealing with trauma and using dark comedy as a mode of facilitating dialogue on that. I've been talking with organizations such as A Voice for the Innocent about using it in an educational way, and I'm excited about that too. So lots of possibilities and things, and I guess I'm just excited about the opportunities and any of that stuff. And I'm excited to be alive. I'm excited to be here. we'll see what happens other than that.
You're doing it. It's good. It's good that you're doing
something.
Yeah, there's so many things to be done. It's good. I mean, it sounds like you have a good attitude about everything.
Sometimes. It's hard to maintain, but there are definitely, I definitely go through patches where being excited about anything is laborious, but I try to, validate those feelings for myself and let myself feel those ways, and then try to come back to being centered and being generally grateful.
Yeah. What keeps you going? Like during those down times, do you do yoga, or is it hanging with your cat, or do you write and that kind of releases the tension? Because I mean, you sound like things are going really well, but it's like you're a professional plate juggler, and things are going great now because all the plates are up in the air, but you know what I mean? Like there's always, the industry and making films and everything is just like, let's try,
Yep.
So how do you keep yourself going when you're kind of feeling low?
That's a good question. And I like that analogy, by the way, the plate juggler, because I'm sure that it also looks to other people like I'm sure to someone else it looks like I'm doing a better job than I think I'm doing, and I'm sure I think that way about other people, and it's so funny our perception of other plate jugglers while we are juggling plates. My cat, for sure, obviously. As you touched on, as you can already tell, I'm very very normal and love my cat very much. Writing helps. I mean, anytime I get to do any of those things that I love to do so much, I feel more centered. Every time I'm getting to focus creative energy into something, I feel more centered. And I do, to stay in shape for stunts, and also just in general, I do Krav Maga, which is an Israeli self-defense technique, and that definitely helps. I mean, getting to hit something or kick something or attack something every week definitely helps my mental state, and it's probably also good for the people who have to be around me. Also, just anytime I get to be immersed in nature, I find it centers me a lot. Getting to just walk, just going and wandering places. It's free and it's I find very rewarding intellectually and then on a spiritual almost level. Kind of because we are animals, but we're so removed from the nature that created us, and so sometimes just being around that makes me feel at least more rooted, pun intended. I'm glad you enjoyed that. I'm good.
Because you could have just said it and I wouldn't have even noticed. But then you're all like, pun intended. And it's like, oh, zinger.
Wink, wink. Nudge, nudge. Yep. I'm here all evening. Tip your waiter. Appreciate the support.
Oh, gosh. So
I also sometimes, thank you. See, but that's something that's subjective. Not everybody thinks that. Most people do not, in fact. And I've kind of touched on this a little bit while we've been talking, but I really enjoy existential trains of thought, and I oddly find them grounding when I'm kind of lost in the ether as well. If I think about, like we were talking about, like how short life is, or how amazing life is, and yet so minuscule in the grand scheme of things. And I find that stuff comforting. It takes the pressure off.
Yeah. Recently there was a meme on Facebook, and it was like showed the solar system by size, And the like sun's like humongous, and then like there's other planets and they're smaller. And then we're this tiny little rock.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, you are here. I was like, oh yeah, okay. Relax.
Yeah. Your life is this big. Like a fraction of this tiny thing. Because there are billions of other beings on it with lives as complex as ours, and that's unbelievable and crazy.
Yeah, and we get, 80 to 100 years to like figure it out, and then, and then it's a new crowd of people being like, man, this world is crazy. You're like, yeah.
Yeah, right, exactly. Having new ideas or the same ideas or the same ideas that they think are new ideas, and then eventually there won't be any people on this rock, and who knows what that's going to be like.
Well, we won't know.
We will not, yeah. Spoiler alert, not us. We do not get to know.
It's going to be the natural disaster that we happen to be part of. I don't think we're going to
the eradication of the human race, probably not.
I think it's going to be a while in the future.
Yeah, you're right. Well, I guess I can stop stressing about it.
Yeah, I mean, even in Walking Dead, they make new communities, and they're still annoying neighbors, so you're never going to get away from it.
I love it. I'm clearly behind. I need to catch up on that show.
Oh, I'm just making generic statements about, because like the world is,
I see.
It's like a post-apocalyptic world, and like everything terrible happens, but they still somehow weave in the like little dramatic moments of relationships and stuff.
Oh yeah.
And you're like, yeah, that shit never ends.
Yeah, right. You still, it's the apocalypse, and you still can't fuck your neighbor's wife, or it's frowned upon at least. And there are still social ramifications.
Yeah, people are like, ooh, not cool. Even when it's the end of the world, turns out.
Yeah. Turns out people will still be extra about things, regardless of the circumstances.
I wonder sometimes if the horror movie genre is actually to get the sort of existential thoughts going in you too, because like sometimes when you imagine what's going on in those worlds, like especially the more fantastical ones, where it's like, this is a wild other world, like this couldn't exist. The ones where they could exist, I'm like, get me out of here. This is too real. This happened yesterday. It's like, this is a documentary, guys. And they're like, no, it's not. I'm like, yeah, it is. But
they're in this house right now.
Well, not like for instance, the other, a couple weeks ago, I watched the movie Unsane. And
I've heard about this.
Yeah, well, it's a very good movie. It's a lot better than I thought it was going to be. I kind of watched it. My husband was like, nah, I don't want to watch it. So he was out of town. And I was like, I'm watching this movie. It's going to be good. And it was total psychological thriller. It was in my head the whole time. I was like, oh God, this is going to happen. This is so real. Oh God, why? But it was great because I was like so deeply embedded in it. Like when it ended, it was like you said, how you like get involved in the whole thing. You're like breathing with them. You're like, oh God, what's going to happen? When the movie ended, it was like a weight lifted off my shoulders. I was like, oh God, thank God that's not real. Oh.
Right. Yeah. See, you probably experienced like your brain probably got kind of high off of that, of the experience of being in that, and then being able to step back out of it, which we can't do from our own problems.
Yeah. Though not going to lie, Jay Farrow's in it. So I had a hard time not IMDbing it the whole time. Jay Farrow from SNL.
Oh, got it. Thank you. Yeah. I knew the name. I'm not great with names sometimes.
Yeah, it was like as soon as I saw him, I was taken out of it because I was all like, ooh, Jay Farrow. Ooh, look at him being in this movie. That's super great. Oh, I like what he's doing. Oh, he's really... And then I was like, no, back in. Focus.
Get back in the game. That's so funny because I feel like everyone kind of always has one or the other relationship to seeing actors like that, where you either you either love them so much you don't care and you follow them along, or you can't focus because you know you've seen them in that thing. But what is that thing? Especially with character actors. I love when people message me on Instagram, and like, you are clearly not one of these people because you do your homework and are very diligent. But I love when people message me and they're like, "Hey, I saw you in Terrifier. Were you the woman in Bye Bye Man?" I'm like, you could find this out very easily. Like I'm not complaining. I just think it's funny that it takes more effort to message me than it just look it up.
Yeah.
I love IMDb. Are you one of those people that it's great? Are you one of those people that likes the trivia?
Sometimes, but half of it I think is made up, so I'm not super into it. Oh, right.
Okay, you think so? Don't tell me that.
Go ahead.
Oh, what?
Tell me what you're going to tell me.
No, I was just going to nerd out about the trivia section of IMDb. But what were you about to say? I hope so, but there's no way to know for sure. I mean, I know that some of it is.
Like your
it's kind of like
IMDb
Wikipedia,
profile is super organized and good, and it has all the information seemingly.
Thank you.
I mean, you can check it to your own resume. I'm sure it's, off a little bit. But like, for instance, I've acted in a number of things and it's not organized for me. And I asked my agent, how do I fix this? And he was like, you can't. It just exists without you. And I was like, what? So like, I've been in...
What, unorganized in what way?
Meaning like, there are 7 or 8 profiles for me that all have...
Oh, no. That aren't linked?
No.
Oh, that's weird.
And I
have a friend that happens to. That's strange.
And my agent was just like, don't worry about it. And I was like, okay. That's fine. I mean, I haven't done that much. I've done like 3 things total. And it was like, 2 short films and a commercial or whatever. And they don't put commercials on. But you know what I mean? Like, it's...
Yeah, no, but
it's
that's
like
annoying.
Random stuff. And I was just like, oh, I guess it's not for me.
You took it as a sign from the divine, from the IMDb god.
Well, I'll keep doing stuff until somebody recognizes and then consolidates all the things.
Yeah, I mean, well, it also seems like it wouldn't be necessarily as, like, I imagine people in the theater community and like improv specific don't necessarily seek out that as the source of your validity, if that makes sense.
No, Austin's not really the town that's checking your IMDb profile to see if you'll be friends with them. No. It's more like, what improv school do you go to?
What are the big ones there? Are they any of the same schools?
Oh, I mean, there's 5 major long-form improv theaters in Austin, and then 1 short-form that is a resurgence. So Comedy Sports with a Z, the original, like, branded style, was in Austin like first before everything else, and then left, and now it's back. I think it's like a I think it's one of those things where it's like a franchise. Like somebody has to go to Comedy Sports and say like, hey, can I open a theater with your style name? Whereas the long form theaters are all different, and they all are sort of born of different styles or different like community building. Like, it happens here and there. So there's 5 improv theaters in Austin, and they are the Hideout, the Fallout, the Institution, Merlin Works, and Cold Town. And they all
I love those names.
Solid, functional schools that run classes and do shows, and they all have different strengths and weaknesses. And so, you can, it's a wonderful improv town. If you ever want to take 1,000,000 workshops and go to 1,000,000 classes and learn so many different things and meet so many different people, that's what Austin Improv has going for it.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
And which one do you work at? You were saying you teach classes at one of them?
Fallout is the main one for me. Fallout is a theater that was born from the ashes of another theater crumbling, and I was part of the original crumbled theater that failed due to the owners being shitbags. And then the community here in Austin was like, hey, want to just be a theater anyway? And then everyone came together and made Fallout. So Fallout like took over the space and
that's so cool.
Did the whole thing. So yeah, the community sort of took over that one, and it actually helped because Austin's a nice town where like there's 5 improv theaters, but they're not in competition. They're like in collaboration. So the the birth of the Fallout Theater was like a great thing because it really helped unite all of the communities together. Because when the community was like, hey, our owners are crap and now we're trying to do this, can anyone help us? Like, what do we need to do? And every other theater like helped with like business practices and like paperwork on what you need to say about, you know, like this is the way we phrase our privacy policy, and this is how we phrase our, you know, harassment policy. And everyone worked together to help Fallout rebuild. And so now it's great because it really helped the whole community kind of become a little closer. And now everybody is excited and showcases all the differences. So it's like, oh, you want to work on some narrative stuff? Go to the Hideout. Oh man, you want to develop some sort of quirky, wild, one-off show? Call the guys at Fallout. They'll put it up. Like, oh yeah, man, you love musicals and you want to do musical improv? Go to Merlin Works. They will get you hooked up. Like all sorts of different stuff. So it's fun. It's fun because the competition doesn't need to be there because there's so many possible performances to be done. So each group kind of just handles, you know, a little bit of it, and then there's something for everyone.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah, I like it. Oh, one weird, crazy thing before we stop talking. It was an IMDb thing. The other day, there's this new, like, HBO special, and it was, it's The Emperor's Newest Clothes, right? So I don't know if you know, there's a Hans Christian Andersen, like, short story fairy tale called The Emperor's New Clothes, and the Emperor. Oh,
I know the story, yeah.
Yeah, essentially he's looking for a new fancy outfit, and the tailors swindle him and give him nothing and say, here's your invisible cloak and here's your invisible shirt, and oh my god, everyone's gonna love it. And his yes men around him are all like, yeah, it's great, oh my god, everyone loves it, super great. And then he goes outside in front of the town and is naked, and everyone's like, what the hell is happening right now? And most of the town is like, it's fine, we love it. And then one little girl is like, what is happening? You need to put clothes on. And so it's just a regular thing. It was like a 25-minute little redo of the old fairy tale, right, on HBO. Had a couple famous people, you know, they wrote some songs, you know, they wanted to have a nice time. Nothing crazy, very regular. Now that I'm a parent, I'm watching a lot of stuff on like HBO Family, so I see that there's like 150 million redos of fairy tales all the time. So I'm like, yeah, regular. Well, because I'm me, I went on IMDb to look up who everyone is and who's working on it and all the stuff. And I go to IMDb, and there is a review for this thing, this child's fairy tale show. And it's a review, and the guy is like, this is some anti-Trump bullshit. Why do you liberals have to create these stories to show that, you know, try to say that Trump is this terrible leader? Damn you for making this. And I was like, that hilarious.
Story is very old.
It's hilarious that this man thinks someone wrote it about Trump. And I really wanted to respond and say, dude, this was written like in the 1600s or something. Like, this review says more about you and what you think about Trump than anything.
Wow.
Oh
that's
so much.
I can't say I've spent much time in the like comments section of IMDb because I'm afraid of things like that. That's
I just never noticed it until then. Because, you know, it's usually like, great movie. Mean, whatever.
Right. No. I mean, people have also said the same thing about any sort of content that promotes compassion over hatred and things like that. I mean, it's not hard to make something that's against the current climate.
I just thought it was so funny that the guy was like talking about a story that was hundreds of years old. I was like, this is not about Trump. Trump was not even a glimmer in his grandfather's eye before, this thing was written and done 1,000 times. There's hundreds of Emperor New Clothes movies. Hundreds.
Oh yeah, The Emperor's New Groove is a fantastic film.
Oh,
that's great. That's a good story.
Ridiculous. Well, Jenna, thank you so much for taking the time out of your night.
Yeah, no, thank you.
I'm so glad that I got to
so
chat
much fun
with you.
Me too. I'm so glad that we met back in the fall. This has been a lot of fun.
Thanks for listening to Yes But Why Podcast. Check out all our episodes on yesbutwhypodcast.com or check out all the content on our network, HC Universal, at hcuniversalnetwork.com.